From the strip, it looked like a sandstorm. But the smoke wasn't coming from the desert. It was rising from the biggest hotel in Las Vegas. Inside, people were clawing at sealed windows just to breathe one more minute. November the 21st, 1980, 7:17 a.m. A busboy named Roy Parrish walked into the deli on the ground floor of the MGM Grand Hotel and smelled something burning. He checked the kitchen. Nothing obvious. The smell persisted. Meanwhile, 3 floors above him, over 5,000 guests were sleeping off another night in Las Vegas. Unaware that in the hidden spaces between floors, a fire was already spreading through a building that had no sprinklers in its casino, no fire alarms in most guest rooms, and plastic everything. The MGM Grand had opened just 4 years earlier as the largest hotel in the world. 26 stories, 2,075 rooms. A casino the size of 4 football fields. The building cost $106 million and represented everything Vegas wanted to be in the late 70s. Bigger, flashier, more excessive than anything that came before. Except the owners had cut corners in ways that would prove catastrophic. But we'll come back to that. At 7:20 a.m., flames burst through a wall in the deli. Parrish ran. Within 90 seconds, fire was rolling across the casino ceiling like an orange river. The fuel was everywhere. Polyvinyl chloride wall coverings, polystyrene foam padding, polyurethane chair cushions, plastic slot machine housings. When this material burns, it doesn't just produce heat, it produces hydrogen cyanide, carbon monoxide, and thick black smoke that's toxic enough to kill in 3 breaths. Meanwhile, guests upstairs were still asleep. The casino had no sprinkler system. Nevada law at the time didn't require them in buildings under 3 stories, and technically, the casino level counted as a single story, even though it had 30-foot ceilings. This loophole saved the MGM Grand's owners roughly $1 million during construction. Instead, the building relied on something called a smoke detector system that was supposed to alert staff to evacuate the building. Except, when the smoke detectors triggered at 7:25 a.m., many employees didn't know what the alarm meant. Some thought it was a false alarm. Others didn't hear it at all over the noise of slot machines. Fire moves differently in a casino than in a normal building. The open floor plan creates a wind tunnel effect. The high ceilings concentrate heat at the top, turning the space into a kiln. At 7:28 a.m., the temperature near the casino ceiling reached 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The aluminum framework holding the dropped ceiling began to melt. Flaming debris rained down onto carpet, furniture, and people, who were still trying to understand what was happening. Meanwhile, the fire found the seams. Modern casinos are sealed environments. No windows, controlled air, designed to keep you inside and gambling. The MGM Grand was no different. But it had one critical flaw: the building's ventilation system, which was supposed to contain smoke, instead became a distribution network. Ducts carried superheated toxic gas upward through the building at terrifying speed. By 7:30 a.m., black smoke was pouring from air vents on every floor, even though the fire itself was still confined to the casino level. Guests 20 stories up were choking on smoke from a fire they couldn't see. Joan Carbone was on the 21st floor when she woke to screaming. She opened her door and was hit by a wall of smoke so thick she couldn't see her hand in front of her face. She dropped to the floor and crawled back into her room. The windows didn't open. They were sealed. Tempered glass designed to withstand the desert heat. She grabbed a chair and smashed it against the window. Nothing. She tried again. The chair bounced off. Meanwhile, in rooms across the building, hundreds of people were doing the same thing, smashing furniture against windows that wouldn't break. At 7:32 a.m., the Las Vegas Fire Department received the first call. Captain Mike Gallagher arrived 4 minutes later to find smoke pouring from every window on the upper floors and flames shooting 50 feet out of the casino level. He immediately called for every available unit in Clark County. This was already the worst hotel fire in Nevada history, and it had been burning for less than 20 minutes. But then it got worse. The stairwells, which were supposed to be pressurized and smoke-free, were filling with toxic gas. The building's HVAC system was actively pumping smoke into the escape routes. Guests who tried to evacuate found themselves in pitch-black stairwells filled with smoke so caustic it burned their lungs. Many turned back. Those who continued often collapsed before reaching the ground floor. Meanwhile, firefighters climbing up those same stairs found bodies piled at the landings. People who'd gotten within reach of safety before the smoke overwhelmed them. On the 8th floor, a man named Steve Shaw wrapped wet towels around his face and led 11 people down a stairwell by feel. They made it to the 6th floor before the smoke became so dense that Shaw passed out. The others dragged him down 3 more floors. On the 2nd floor landing, they found a door and stumbled into a smoke-filled corridor. Shaw regained consciousness long enough to kick down a door into an office that had a window. They broke it and started screaming for help. A ladder truck reached them at 8:15 a.m. All 12 survived, except 73 other people who'd tried the same stairwell didn't make it. The top floors were cut off entirely. Smoke in the stairwells, smoke in the hallways, no fire alarms ringing in most rooms because the system was designed to alert staff, not guests. Many people slept through the critical first 20 minutes when evacuation was still possible. By the time they woke up, the building was a chimney. Meanwhile, on the roof, people were gathering. Dale Kirkjian, a helicopter pilot doing traffic reports for a local radio station, saw the smoke from 3 miles away. He diverted immediately. At 7:45 a.m., he landed on the MGM Grand's roof and found 30 people waiting, coughing, desperate. His helicopter held 4 passengers. He took the worst cases, 2 elderly women and a man having a heart attack. He flew them to a nearby parking lot, dropped them off, and went back. He would make 8 trips that morning, pulling people off the roof in groups of 4. But then the smoke got too thick to fly through safely. By 8 a.m., Metro helicopters had joined the effort. They hovered above the roof, lowering rescue harnesses. One pilot, James Compton, brought his helicopter so close to the building that his rotor wash was blowing burning debris off the roof. He held that hover for 40 minutes, pulling people up one at a time. Meanwhile, below him, firefighters were learning just how toxic the smoke was. Captain Mike Smith entered the casino at 8:10 a.m. with full breathing apparatus. The heat was so intense, his face mask started to melt. The smoke was so thick, his flashlight beam disappeared after 6 inches. He advanced 15 feet and found his first body, a woman who'd collapsed near a slot machine. He dragged her toward the entrance. Then he found another. And another. He pulled out 3 people before his air tank ran empty, and he had to retreat. Of the 3, only 1 survived, except there were dozens more bodies in there that wouldn't be reached for hours. The fire department faced an impossible geometry problem. The casino level was roughly 100,000 square feet, with a ceiling 30 feet high. The fire was generating so much heat that water from their hoses was turning to steam before it reached the flames. They needed to get inside to fight it, but the smoke was killing anyone without air tanks within seconds. Meanwhile, upstairs, people were still trapped. On the 24th floor, a cocktail waitress named Dina de Khasare was trapped in her room with 6 other people. They'd stuffed towels under the door and broken the bathroom mirror to use the shards to try cutting through the window seal. It didn't work. At 8:30 a.m., Deshazare saw a helicopter hovering nearby. She waved a white towel out a small vent. The pilot saw her, but there was no way to reach her. The helicopter couldn't get close enough. The windows wouldn't open. Meanwhile, the smoke in her room was getting thicker. Firefighters on the ground were facing a crisis. Their ladders reached to the 10th floor. People were trapped on the 24th. The roof rescues were saving dozens, but hundreds more were in rooms with no way out. Then someone remembered the building next door, the Barbary Coast Hotel. It was shorter, but its roof was close to the MGM's 8th floor. Firefighters positioned aerial ladders to bridge the gap. They started bringing people across from the MGM's lower floors to the Barbary's roof, then down to safety. But this only worked for floors 4 through 10. Above that, people were on their own. At 9 a.m., the smoke began to clear slightly from some upper floors. Not because the fire was under control, but because it had consumed most of the available oxygen in the casino and was starting to die down. This created a brief window. Firefighters rushed into the stairwells and started moving up floor by floor, breaking down doors, searching rooms. What they found would haunt them for decades. Bodies in beds. Bodies in bathtubs where people had sought water. Bodies at windows where people had died trying to break through. Except some rooms had survivors. On the 19th floor, firefighters found a man who'd survived by sealing himself in the bathroom and turning on the shower to create steam. On the 22nd floor, they found a family of 4 who'd stuffed every crack in their room with wet towels and were found unconscious, but alive. On the 16th floor, they found a woman who'd broken her window by throwing the television through it, something that worked because she'd hit the exact right spot to shatter the tempered glass. But then there were the rooms where they arrived 10 minutes too late. The official cause of death for most victims wasn't burns, it was smoke inhalation. Specifically, hydrogen cyanide poisoning from burning plastic. Hydrogen cyanide blocks the body's ability to use oxygen. People breathing it don't just suffocate, their cells suffocate. 3 breaths of highly concentrated cyanide smoke can cause unconsciousness. 6 breaths can cause death. Meanwhile, many victims had elevated carbon monoxide levels that alone would have been lethal. The combination was devastating. By 11 a.m., the fire was largely contained. The casino level was a charred ruin. The upper floors had massive smoke damage, but limited fire damage. the flames never actually spread past the casino and first floor. Instead, it was the smoke that killed. Smoke that traveled through elevator shafts. Smoke that poured through ventilation ducts. Smoke that seeped under doors and through electrical outlets. The building's design had turned it into a gas chamber. But then came the count. 85 people died in the MGM Grand Fire. 712 were injured. Most deaths occurred on floors 8 through 20. The pattern was clear. The higher you were, the more dangerous it was, because smoke rises and concentrates. Except the 8th floor had the highest death toll of any single floor. 16 people died there. The reason was brutal. The 8th floor hallways had relatively good visibility early in the fire, leading many people to think they could make it to the stairs. They couldn't. The stairwells were filled with lethal gas. Meanwhile, investigations were already beginning. Within days, fire marshals identified the point of origin, an electrical ground fault in the wall of the deli restaurant. Worn wiring had sparked inside the wall cavity at approximately 7:10 a.m. The spark ignited wood framing and insulation. For 7 minutes, the fire burned inside the wall where no one could see it. Then it reached the casino. Instead of concrete or steel fire blocks between floors, standard in modern construction, the MGM Grand had used cheap wood framing wrapped in flammable materials. The fire spread horizontally through the casino in minutes. But then, investigators found something worse. The building's sprinkler system existed only in guest rooms, stairwells, and the showroom. The casino had none. The restaurants had none. The shopping areas had none. This was legal under Nevada law, but it violated the spirit of modern fire codes that had been adopted in most other states after the MGM Grand was built. Investigators calculated that if the casino had been equipped with sprinklers, the fire would have been contained to a single wall cavity. Instead, it became a holocaust. Meanwhile, the victims' families were asking questions no one wanted to answer. Why were the windows sealed? Because the casino wanted climate control and energy efficiency. Opening windows would have let the carefully controlled cool air escape, except sealed windows meant trapped people had no way to get fresh air during the fire. Why were there no fire alarms in guest rooms? Because Nevada code only required alarms in public spaces. Guest rooms were considered private, except this meant hundreds of people slept through the first critical minutes when escape was still possible. Why did the ventilation system spread smoke instead of containing it? Because the system wasn't designed with fire suppression in mind. It was designed to maximize comfort and minimize costs. The lawsuits began within weeks. Over 1,400 plaintiffs filed claims. The cases revealed a pattern of decisions prioritizing profit over safety. During construction, fire safety engineers had recommended a full sprinkler system throughout the building. Cost? $1 million. The MGM rejected it. Engineers recommended fire-resistant wall coverings throughout. The MGM chose cheaper but flammable materials that looked identical. Engineers recommended a voice evacuation system that would have allowed staff to give specific instructions to guests during emergencies. The MGM chose a simple alarm system that many guests couldn't hear over the casino noise. Meanwhile, the criminal investigation was uncovering more. No one was ever charged with a crime related to the fire. The Clark County District Attorney determined that while the building's design was inadequate by modern standards, it complied with Nevada law at the time of construction. Cutting corners wasn't illegal. It was standard practice. Instead, the financial penalties were severe. The MGM Grand's insurance paid out over $230 million in settlements. The hotel itself spent an additional $75 million renovating the building with sprinklers throughout, fire-resistant materials, better alarms, and windows that could be opened from inside. But then another disaster struck. 3 months after the MGM fire, on February 8th, 1981, the Las Vegas Hilton caught fire. 8 people died. The cause was nearly identical: an electrical fire in a restaurant spreading through a building with inadequate sprinklers and smoke control. The proximity of the two disasters finally forced Nevada to act. Within months, the state legislature passed the strictest hotel fire safety codes in the nation. Every hotel was required to retrofit with sprinklers throughout. Fire alarms were required in every guest room. Voice evacuation systems became mandatory. Ventilation systems had to include automatic smoke dampers. Except these changes came too late for the 93 people who died in the 2 fires. The psychological impact on survivors was profound. Joan Carbone, the woman who tried to break her window with a chair, developed severe PTSD. She couldn't sleep in buildings taller than 2 stories. She avoided hotels entirely for years. Many survivors reported the same symptoms: panic attacks, insomnia, an inability to feel safe in enclosed spaces. Meanwhile, the firefighters who'd pulled bodies from the upper floors struggled silently. In 1980, PTSD in first responders wasn't well understood. Many suffered alone. The MGM Grand itself survived, though its reputation didn't. The hotel struggled for years before finally being sold and rebranded as Bally's in 1986. A new MGM Grand opened on the Strip in 1993. A different building, different location, but built to standards that exceeded even the new Nevada codes. The original building still stands as Bally's today. Tour the casino floor and you'd never know what happened there. Except in the staff areas, old-timers still won't talk about it. Fire investigators use the MGM Grand as a case study in what's called systems failure. No single decision caused the disaster. Instead, dozens of small compromises, each individually legal, each individually justified as cost-saving, created a building that was a death trap waiting for a spark. The cheap wiring, the flammable materials, the missing sprinklers, the sealed windows, the inadequate alarms, the poor smoke control. Remove any one of those factors and the fire might have been contained. Instead, they combined into catastrophe. Meanwhile, the lessons spread beyond Nevada. Within 2 years of the MGM fire, hotels across America were upgrading their fire systems. Insurance companies, spooked by the massive payouts, began requiring sprinklers and advanced smoke control even in cities where codes didn't mandate them. The cost of retrofitting was significant, roughly $20,000 per room, but the alternative was uninsurable risk. Except the changes went deeper than just equipment. The fire fundamentally changed how architects design tall buildings. Modern high-rises use compartmentalization. Every floor is sealed from the ones above and below with concrete and steel fire barriers. Stairwells are pressurized to keep smoke out. Ventilation systems automatically shut down during fires instead of spreading smoke. Windows on upper floors are required to be openable or have designated breakage points. None of this was standard in 1980. But then, 1980 was when we learned what happens when you build up instead of building safe. The human stories from that morning remain devastating. The couple celebrating their anniversary on the 23rd floor who died in each other's arms. The man who survived by tying bedsheets together and lowering himself 3 floors to a balcony, only to learn his wife hadn't made it out. The blackjack dealer who re-entered the burning casino to pull out 2 co-workers and died going back for a 3rd. The helicopter pilot who made 8 trips and afterwards said he'd see those faces on the roof every time he closed his eyes. Meanwhile, the survivors built their own community. For years afterward, MGM fire survivors held annual meetings. They'd gather, share their stories, remember the dead, and support each other through the trauma. Many had survivor's guilt. They'd made it out, while others, sometimes people in the next room, hadn't. There was no logic to who survived. Some of the fittest, most prepared people died. Some of the most vulnerable survived through pure chance. A woman on the 22nd floor survived because she'd taken a sleeping pill and slept through the entire fire. The smoke never reached her room in lethal concentration. A marathon runner on the 12th floor died trying to run down a stairwell. Luck, not virtue, determined survival. The engineering community studied the MGM fire obsessively. The National Fire Protection Association produced a 400-page report analyzing every decision, every material, every system. They concluded that the fire spread rate in the casino was among the fastest ever recorded in a commercial building. The entire casino floor was fully involved in under 7 minutes. The smoke production was catastrophic, enough to fill 100 average houses per minute at peak. The toxicity was exceptional. Air samples taken from upper floors showed cyanide concentrations 20 times the lethal threshold. But then they analyzed what worked. The compartmentalization between guest rooms saved hundreds. While smoke seeped under doors, it didn't spread rapidly room to room. People who stayed in their rooms and sealed the door cracks had a much higher survival rate than those who tried to evacuate through smoke-filled hallways. The few sprinklers that existed worked perfectly. Not a single person died in an area protected by sprinklers. The fireproof stairwell doors, when kept closed, prevented smoke infiltration on some floors. These successes informed every fire code revision that followed. Meanwhile, the families of victims wanted answers that went beyond engineering. Why did it take 7 minutes for the first alarm to sound? Because the smoke detectors had to reach a certain threshold before triggering, and by then the fire was already massive. Why did some elevators keep running, carrying people into smoke-filled hallways? Because the elevator recall system, which should have brought all cars to the ground floor, failed when heat damaged the control wiring. Why did the emergency lighting in stairwells fail on multiple floors? Because the backup batteries were located in areas that filled with smoke early, causing them to overheat and fail. Each answer revealed another preventable failure, except preventable meant spending money that wasn't spent. The economic calculation haunts fire safety experts. The $1 million the MGM saved by not installing casino sprinklers cost the company and its insurers over $300 million in settlements and renovations. The building sat partially closed for 8 months during repairs, losing roughly $2 million per week in revenue. The reputational damage was incalculable. Instead of saving money, the shortcuts created financial catastrophe. But then, this is the paradox of safety spending. The cost is immediate and visible, while the benefit is hypothetical until disaster strikes. Today, the MGM Grand Fire stands as a dividing line in American fire safety. Before 1980, hotels were death traps. After 1980, they became some of the safest buildings in the world. Modern hotels have sprinklers in every room, heat detectors in every closet, smoke control systems that create safe zones, emergency communication systems that reach every guest, and stairwells designed to remain passable even in worst-case fires. The changes were expensive. They were also non-negotiable. Meanwhile, the fire's legacy extends beyond buildings. Every firefighter in America studies the MGM Grand. It's taught in fire academies as an example of what happens when smoke management fails. The tactics used to rescue people from the roof became standard high-rise fire procedure. The recognition that smoke toxicity, not heat, is the primary killer in modern fires changed everything from building materials standards to evacuation procedures. Except perhaps the most important lesson is simpler. Corners cut in construction are written in blood when disaster strikes. On November 21st, 2020, 40 years after the fire, survivors gathered at a memorial near the site. The names of 85 victims are engraved in stone. The youngest was 16. The oldest was 87. They came from 14 states and 3 countries. Some were high rollers on vacation. Others were staff working the early shift. Many were elderly guests who couldn't move quickly when the smoke came. The memorial doesn't list how they died, just that they died here, in a building that was supposed to be the grandest hotel in the world. Instead, it became their tomb. The sealed windows are what survivors remember most. That moment of realization that you can see safety, the ground, the fresh air, the fire trucks, but you can't reach it. Glass thick enough to stop a bullet blocking you from the one thing you need to survive. Multiple survivors described the same desperate thought. If I could just break through, if I could just get one breath of clean air, I'd be fine. Except the glass wouldn't break, and the smoke kept coming. And eventually, for 85 people, the smoke won. They built a palace of light, and it became a furnace. Not through malice, but through the accumulated weight of small decisions, where cost mattered more than safety. The MGM Grand Fire didn't happen because someone wanted people to die. It happened because someone decided sprinklers were too expensive. Someone decided sealed windows looked better. Someone decided minimal fire alarms were sufficient. Someone decided flammable materials were close enough to safe. Meanwhile, 5,000 people slept above a casino filled with plastic and poor wiring. The fire burned for 4 hours. The smoke lasted for days. The investigations took years. But the lesson was immediate. When you build tall, you build a chimney. And if you don't design for fire, eventually fire will redesign your building into a crematorium. The MGM Grand proved this in the clearest terms possible. 85 people paid the price for that lesson. The rest of us benefit from the codes written in their memory. From the Strip, it looked like a sandstorm, but it was smoke from burning plastic and human ambition. The biggest hotel in the world was choking to death. And inside, people who'd come to gamble on slot machines found themselves gambling on one last breath of clean air that never came.